My name is Tom. I'm the founder and CEO of TerraCycle. You know what, we did have a mascot. Back when we were a worm poop company, TerraCycle actually started as a company that took organic waste, fed it to worms, packaged it in used soda bottles, and we had Hermie the Wormy was our mascot, which was and then, you know, it's so funny you ask this question, because then like a few years later, we had a team member who developed a cartoon series around Garbodgetron. And Hermie the Wormy was sort of the hero, and he was battling the evils of Garbodgetron. And there was actually a whole TerraCycle cartoon series that was used like as an educational thing for kids in elementary school. The function inside TerraCycle, we have a very diverse set of skill sets, you know, from research and development to finance, communications, all sorts of different things. But the fantasy job I would have if I came and worked here would be in our upcycling design department. Imagine you walk into this, you know, workshop, which is a wonderland of different ways that you can upcycle waste. In fact, if you see the space behind me, that's all built by this overall team. You know, everything on all of our offices are made from waste. We make beautiful sculptures, you know, from waste for folks, and that all comes from that department. So that's where honestly I would hang out. And once in a blue moon, if I have an hour, I might go back there and help out a little bit. It's an interesting question, because what attracted me to focusing and building a business around how do we eliminate the idea of waste has been this early and now lifelong fascination with all of the strangeness of waste as an idea. You know, waste is really invented in the 1950s, and it has all these sort of really weird anomalies beyond being very new. You know, it's not a natural idea. Waste is the only industry that will own everything we possess one day, but for how big of a concept that is, it also is strangely the least innovative industry per dollar of revenue it enjoys. Waste is the only material that we pay to get rid of. In other words, it has negative raw material value. It's got all this sort of weirdness in it. And that's one of the things that at TerraCycle we try to unpack, because you can then build very interesting business models around then solving for waste by taking advantage of some of the weirdness that exists, because it is foundationally not a natural concept. TerraCycle's journey has always been around how do we eliminate the idea of waste, and we began by effectively being a consumer product company with a thesis that we would make our products out of garbage. That's how the whole worm poop thing began, you know, feeding waste to worms and packaging it in used beverage containers. What we realized after about 5 years of building a business around that ethos was that if we make the product the hero, as any consumer product company does, then even if we make the rule that it must be made from waste, it's going to be using the very best of the garbage out there, and we wouldn't be holistically able to solve any and all waste. So then we shifted about 5 years in to say, let's make garbage the hero in the business model. And so begot what TerraCycle is really known for now, which is creating recycling programs for those objects that are not locally recyclable in our councils or municipalities. And we built that into, you know, just under $100 million business over, you know, the past 20 odd years. But in doing so, we kept asking ourselves, is recycling a foundational solution to waste? Does it eliminate the idea of it, right? And it doesn't, right? It is more like taking a pill if you have a headache, right? It might solve the issues, but it's not solving the reason you got the headache to begin with. So recycling is critical because we are in a waste crisis, but we kept then exploring on how do we go one step further, and the answer we landed on is we must learn from the past. You know, back 100 years ago, we darned our socks, cobbled our shoes, our motor oil to our milk came, you know, in reusable packaging, and there wasn't the concept of waste. And so we thought, you know, that's where we really have to get to, is a world where we reuse and repair and don't dispose. And so that journey started in about 2017 as a thought experiment. By 2019, we launched it publicly. And since then, you know, we've seen some challenges, certainly, but we've also seen some great success. You know, today in France, you can walk into just about any major supermarket, from a Carrefour to a Monoprix, see over 400 different products from your favorite brands like Coca-Cola to Nutella, shampoo to laundry detergent, you name it. in fully reusable forms. You just buy them, pay a deposit, and then when you're done, you return the empties. And at Loop, which is our reuse division at TerraCycle, we just collect them, they get sorted, we return deposits, they get cleaned and refilled back onto the shelf, and effectively eliminating waste, after every purchase. When we first moved from being a consumer product company that made its products out of garbage to really focusing on the garbage as the business hero, the first thing we had to ask ourselves was, what really makes something recyclable? Because this is, I think, profoundly misunderstood. I think, and we've confirmed this through, major consumer insights with citizens all over the world, is that generally we perceive recycling as a public service, like healthcare. And the way healthcare works is that if the cure exists, it should be administered, irrelevant of cost. And if the cure doesn't exist, that's when you don't get that treatment. And so if then you ask a citizen what makes a aluminum can highly recycled all over the world and a toothbrush not recycled anywhere, they tend to say it's because the aluminum can be recycled and the toothbrush cannot be, because we project recycling as same as a public service. And in medicine, if you have the cure, you get it, and if the cure doesn't exist, you don't, right? And then the solution is you have to invent the cure, the technology, the infrastructure has to be created. But what we have to center on, and what we realized in recycling, is that all recycling, in the end, is run by for-profit companies, garbage companies, and there's no law anywhere in the world that says what these companies collect must be recycled. As a result, they're going to recycle what they can make money on. And really why a cardboard box or an aluminum can is recycled in most places is because it's profitable to recycle. And what makes 95% of objects, from a toothbrush to a wetsuit, to a bicycle helmet, to a baby food pouch, not recyclable, is the inverse. It just costs more to collect and process than the results are worth. And so why would a garbage company run a negative margin or unprofitable model? They won't, right? Similarly, the same reason compostable packaging is very challenged is because it does compost technically, no question, but composters hate it because it ruins their economics. So they typically sort it out and dispose it if they find it in their system. And this is what we have to center on in recycling, is that recycling is not a public service, it is urban mining of our waste for value. And if there's value in that waste, it will very likely be extracted, sorted, and reprocessed. And if there isn't, it will be disposed. And the big white elephant in the room on this is that really since the 1950s, what is the biggest mega trend in object design? Whether you're designing a product or a package, the biggest trend is cost reduction. Everything is cheaper tomorrow than it is today, which is why the recycling rates are going down everywhere in the world. We recycle less of what we consume tomorrow than today because it's progressively less valuable. And that center point on economics was a real unlock, because then if you want to recycle something that isn't locally recyclable, the answer is we got to find someone to pay for it. And then just about anything can be collected and recycled.
At KP, sustainability is in every solution, from recyclable medical device films to recycled content card films. We're leading the future of sustainable packaging.
I'll answer this both for reuse and recycling. In recycling, the waste streams that have been the most exciting to me to not just solve in a laboratory, but be able to implement at scale, across many countries in the world, are things people never thought are possible. Cigarette butt recycling. We have live in many countries around the world, and we will soon celebrate the billionth butt collected and recycled by TerraCycle. And what we do with those is we shred them, we separate the ash tobacco paper and get that composted, and take the filters, which are made from a plastic called cellulose acetate, and turn that into new polymer products. But that same thing has been extended to chewing gum, dirty diapers. It's all these things that people just don't believe can be done. Those are what really sort of tickle me. And what it goes to is, in the end, all objects can be repurposed and recycled. It's just a factor of cost. The only time they really can't be is if there is a law preventing recycling occurring with that particular waste stream, and that may be the case with certain medical waste, where it might be touching bodily fluids, for example, or hazardous materials, right? Certainly those should not be collected and recycled. In reuse, it's somewhat similar. There in reuse, really the key is There's two things that have to occur for reuse to happen. One is that the object must be able to mechanically withstand the rigors of reuse. It has to be able to go around, a minimum of 10 times, and that has a lot of mechanical strain on that package typically. But the bigger question is the health and safety of the package. Can it be done in a safe fashion? Because one must remember that, when that object goes into the consumer's hands, let's say it's a baby food container, you don't know what that consumer did after the baby food was consumed. Maybe they put all sorts of weird things and bad things into that container. And so you have to have an incredibly robust cleaning process so that you can then take that used container and safely put, say, baby food back into it and serve it to the next consumer. And I'm using baby food consciously here because that is an extreme example of one where you want to be hyper safe. What I think we have to remind ourselves in reuse is that we are already very comfortable as a society with reuse. Any restaurant we ever ate at, any hotel we've ever slept at is, all those things we sleep in or eat with are reused thousands and thousands of times. But even things that are even more intimate, if you go to a dentist, the tools they're going to use in your mouth have been in thousands of mouths before yours, and by nature of it being a dentist, probably some pretty diseased and not desirable environments, right? And yet you can do that incredibly safely because they sterilize those tools with the right procedures. At Loop, we've invested so far close to $50 million on trying to really scale reuse across packaged goods. Think beverages to home care, personal care, food products, and so on. And we've run pilots in Canada, the US, UK, France, and Japan, so all over the world. What we've learned is the following. For the consumer, there is no difference between a European, American, or Asian consumer. They all care about reuse. They're all going to do it. They don't really mind the deposit and so on. What they want is fierce convenience because what they would be shifting from is disposable consumption. So our mantra for the consumer in reuse is reuse must feel as close to disposable consumption as possible. We don't do refill stations. We don't ask the consumer to do any cleaning. You just buy it off the shelf full. The only new concept is you pay a deposit and then you can return them at any store. We even let you return them in a reusable garbage bag if you like, to echo that idea of this is the same as what you normally do. One of the unintuitive insights with consumers is a big part of convenience for consumers is they want to be able to go all in. Just like if we shop organic, we don't just want to buy our tomatoes, we want to buy everything. And so having big assortments, big range is a huge aspect of unintuitive convenience for the consumer. But then more importantly, you need convenience for the commercial actors, because this will be some extra work without incrementality, which is what commercial actors typically like to invest in. That is to say, a shampoo company wants to spend a lot of money inventing conditioner, or a toothpaste company wants to spend lots of money inventing mouthwash. It's a little harder to seduce investment to just make that shampoo or toothpaste better, and that's what reuse is. So the way to solve that is you make it as much of a non-event as possible. When we work with a consumer product company, we first survey their whole portfolio to see what package forms are already ready to go for reuse. Think glass bottles or heavy plastics and so on. Those tend to be conducive to reuse with not much change, if any. And then critically important is also the invisible hand of regulation, both carrots and sticks. The reason we're successful in France, and frankly not in the other markets we piloted, is France has some very robust regulation mandating reuse, as well as subsidizing it, both carrots and sticks, to help the commercial actors get over the investment that you need up front to get a system to then scale and have all the benefits that are achieved at scale. Today in France, certain products in our reuse system are cheaper than the disposable version, but that only came about because we got to scale. There are two approaches to nudging business and capitalism to be more conscious. And really what that means is owning the externalities that they create, right? Right now, business is set up by definition to serve profit to shareholders, so its unilateral focus is profitability. And as a result, there's a lot of externalities that that business produces, whether it's deforestation, climate change, waste, and so on, that it does not have to pay for. So there's two ways for business to start owning these externalities, and that is either voluntary action or mandatory action. Voluntary action, the key way to achieve that, and that's been the essence of why TerraCycle's been able to grow for 25 years in a row, is we need to show that by investing in voluntary solutions, you can then achieve the base goals of the business, which might be as simple as driving more market share, more foot traffic to a retailer, these sort of things. But it's important to acknowledge that there's limits on what can occur voluntarily, and that's why mandatory action is important, and that's the role of strong and achievable regulations that slowly, raise the goals and the requirements on companies so that they are stewarding for all the externalities they produce. Yeah, in waste management, there is this real desire to create a silver bullet solution. Chemical recycling, as you say, and compostability are two examples that have trended and have not worked. And the essence of a silver bullet solution is to ignore the white elephant in the room, which is that it's all about economics, right? I don't think we can create some technical wonder, those two would be examples of that magically solve the baseline economics. Because in the end, in circularity, that is to say, you want an object to go around again and again and again instead of just ending up in a pile somewhere or being burned, there's, I believe, only two ways to do that. Either the object has to have enough intrinsic value that you would want to pick it up and give it a new life. Imagine if I put in front of you a beautiful crystal cup, inlaid with precious metals and whatnot. You would happily take that, and you would happily take another. There has to be enough intrinsic value for that. But if I put in front of you a dirty plastic cheap cup and asked you to, give it another life, which would mean clean it out and enjoy using it, I think the only way I could do that is to pay you. So either you have to pay the system to become circular, or you have to have enough value embedded in the object for it to become circular, and that's the white elephant in the room. It's all about economics, unless there are laws that force that circularity to occur, and then you're paying for it anyway through your taxes. And there is no silver bullet that solves that intrinsic foundational economics. The reason compostability doesn't work, and that's not to say these packages or objects don't compost, they certainly do. The issue is the actual composters hate them and sort them out and destroy them. They don't compost them, and they don't because it foundationally makes their business less profitable. The reason chemical recycling doesn't work is not because it technically doesn't work. It does. It does exactly what it says it does. It's just absurdly expensive. And this is why it all boils back down to economics. And I think a way to dissect this is, instead of asking a question on, could that object do something? Could it compost? Could it be chemically recycled? Ask, would that happen in a free market system? Because imagine if I asked you a bunch of could you questions right now, like, could you take off your clothes and jump around naked and then jump around out of the window? You would say, yes, I could. But if I change the could to a would, you'd immediately say absolutely not. And I think that's what we have to think about, is pragmatic, practical things, and would they really happen, not could they, in a laboratory. What has kept me going for 25 years, and I'm sure many more into the future, is that we are doing our work, and every day we are doing more than the year before. We are growing, we're able to create more impact. Sure, there's tremendous headwind. The actual issue is getting bigger. Sometimes, politics doesn't match, what really needs to happen. Right now, we're living through a hyper deregulation. We're living through a lot of narrative on, climate change isn't real, these things. This is certainly headwind. But this is the beauty of running a purposeful business, is the purpose is really motivating. So far, knock on wood, we've been able to somehow do more every year than the year before, and we believe that that will continue. It's also the wonderful people and the partners that make all this happen, that keep a smile on the face and a jump in the step.